If you were to ask the average American right now how to make money, they'd be able to tell you. Just go out and get a job, right? Or go out and create a business. If you were to ask the average American right now how to save money, you'll get a little bit less responses just because of the natural habits or some of the tendencies that people tend to have with their money. And then if you were to ask the average American how to reinvest that dollar and multiply it, you'd get a lot fewer responses. You see, the statistics shows that over 40% of Americans are one paycheck away, get this, from dipping below the poverty line. Now, if that's not alarming to you, then I'm not sure what is. But you know what else is alarming to me is that our school systems never really show us how to manage money. They only show us how to go out and work for a dollar. You see, at least in my school, they never taught us about the 50-30-20 rule, also known as the rules of money. Now, if you've never heard of this, then you're in luck because we're going to be breaking it down in this video about everything that you need to know when it comes to the rules of money, the 50-30-20 rule, how it applies to you and how to utilize it with your own finances. Now, simply put, the 50-30-20 rule is 50% of your after-tax income. And if you're not familiar with what your after-tax income, just take a look at one of your paychecks, your pay stubs in the bottom. It'll tell you your net pay. That's what it is. After taxes, after Social Security, after everything's been taken out, take a look at that number, and that is your post-tax income. Figure out what that number is and then utilize this. 50% of that is going to go toward your needs, 30% of that income is going to go toward your wants, and 20% of that income is going to go toward your savings. Now, before we get into that, I want you to do two things. One, find out what that number is. So if you want to pause the video, or unless you already have it at the top of your head, that way you can follow along in this exercise so that you can track where your money's going. And second, if you don't already have a tracking tool or a budgeting tool for you to know where your finances are at all times, then I highly encourage you to check out the app Every Dollar. Now, they did not pay me to endorse them. In fact, you won't even find their link down at the bottom just because I really don't make a dollar off of them. I want to ultimately help you out with your finances and help you ultimately become not only a better saver, but a better investor. Now, while this video itself is not geared toward any type of investing, I always say that the first step to investing is first getting out of debt, and secondly, being able to save enough money for you to invest. And that's exactly what this video is going to help you out with. Now, while I'm a strong believer of the 50-30-20 rule, and I'm an advocate that this should be taught in schools and in more educational platforms, and that's why, again, we're making this video, is this. The 50-30-20 rule should serve as the framework and the ground level for your investing, for your saving, and for your financial status. Here's what I mean by that. Let's first step into the first part, and that's this. 50% of your needs. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, Irv, what are my needs? Well, my needs are things like my housing. This is for living, whether you're renting, whether you're owning. 50% of your income, again, according to the 50-30-20 rule, is going to go toward that. Next, we have transportation and food. Now, obviously, I have the world's best handwriting, so as I write these down, I'm going to speak out exactly what I'm writing out because it may be a little bit difficult for you to actually see. So we have housing, we have transportation, we have food. Those are some of the basic necessities. Now, when I write these out, you may have different needs, and one of your needs may be childcare. Now, childcare is a big one, especially in the day and age that we live in now, where for the most part, mom and dad, or both spouses, or boyfriend, girlfriend, both have to work in order to be able to provide enough income into their household. Now, this right here may not apply to you, but for a fact, housing applies to you, food applies to you, and transportation, even if you live in a metro area, because even if this isn't, let's say, an actual car that you own, then it could possibly be maybe the subway that you take every day, or maybe if you ride the bus line to and from work or to and from school. That's all going to come down to your basic necessities in order to, again, apply the 50% rule when it comes to your needs. And lastly, some more basic needs that you most likely have is things like utilities and insurance, okay? So when it comes to having your house, having your transportation, having your food, your childcare, utilities, and insurance. And if I am missing one that you most likely have within your household, then you would add it to this. Now, I know that I shared with you the Every Dollar app, and that's to keep your budgeting in place. But if you wanted to run your numbers within a calculator, then I suggest checking out NerdWallet. I'll drop the link down below so that you can check out their calculator. You literally just plug in your numbers, whether you make a bi-weekly paycheck, a weekly paycheck, or just plugging in your salary all together, and it would be able to give those numbers back to you so that you can play with. Because next on here, we have your wants. Now, I want you to think of your wants at the bare minimum of things that you can go without. Now, this is things like your travel. For some of us that like to travel, this is things like dining out. This is things like dining. This is things like going to the movies, okay? Entertainment. So anything that would fall in the lines of entertainment, travel, dining out, hobbies. And this one may surprise you guys, and that's this: clothing. Now, you're probably wondering, well, Irv, you're gonna tell me that I can't go out and buy a shirt, or I can't go out and buy shoes. The answer to that is yes. Now remember, when it comes to you having a budget, and when you're saving for your future, and when you're saving for your retirement, every dollar counts. And when we're talking about clothing, if you notice what I have on right now, it's a regular black t-shirt. If you notice, I don't really have any jewelry apart from my wedding band. When you go to travel, you want to have the 30% of that going toward your wants. Now, it'll quickly wipe you out. Let's say if you make $1,000 bi-weekly, and you have 30% going toward your wants, that's $300, right? If we have $300 going toward designer shoes or a designer purse, then that wipes out your want for that week or that month immediately. So that's why we want to be more conservative when we are actually budgeting for things like dining out, for things like clothing, for things like travel. Now, is this to say that we want to not have fun? Absolutely not. We only live once, right? But on the same token, we only live once, so we want to be responsible, and we want to set ourselves up for our financial future, which leads us to our last and final destination, and that's this. 20% is going to go toward savings. This is going to go toward things like a 401k, an IRA, our savings account. That's important. But what else do we have? We have an emergency fund that we can use that money toward. Maybe we're saving to buy a house and we're tired of renting. That money can go there as well. You see, when it comes to saving 20% of your income, it's so many people find it difficult to just save 10% or even 5%. And the reason for that is because, again, if we go back to that 30%, I can assure you, if you were to actually sit down, run through your numbers, and look at where all of your money is going, you'll see that, wait a minute, I have 50% going toward my living, I have 40% going toward wants, and then I have 10, maybe 5% going into a savings. And this is why we mentioned earlier that the average American, at least 40% of us, are one paycheck away from losing not only our property and getting evicted, but ultimately falling under that poverty line income threshold. Now, I did also want to mention that apart from the 401k and the IRA, these are more considered long-term. We have the housing. If this was, let's say, going to be an investment that you wanted to look into, this could be considered long-term or even in the short term. But you also want to use some of those funds to pay down recurring debt, because this is going to let you get out of that nasty debt that you've possibly fallen within for using credit cards. Maybe if we were to go back here, maybe you have some of those wants are subscriptions that you no longer need. Now, some subscriptions that I'm referring to is things like you could have Netflix, you could have Hulu, you could have YouTube Red, all these subscriptions that you most likely no longer need, especially if you are just going off of basic cable. So many of us no longer really even use cable because we go on platforms like YouTube, or we just search the internet for the information that we need, or to simply get entertained, and that's it. You see, that statistic is actually down as well, where the average American, or at least a millennial, is using the internet 8 hours a day. And again, this is for surfing the web all day long. This is why we see more millennials switching off of cable and coming and transitioning over into having more of a high service when it comes to internet, which that's debatable. If you're working from home, then I encourage you to have that within your needs, but don't get carried away of just having it just to have it if you're not going to be using it for any particular reason. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are some pros and there are some cons when it comes to using the 50-30-20 rule. Some things that I like about it is that it keeps your finances in line, kind of like what we mentioned here. Some things that I don't like about it is, well, you could be in a different situation that maybe you want to save a little bit more than the 20%, or maybe you don't need 50% anymore to live off of. Maybe you found a way to live off of 40%. And so that leads me to say this. If we're looking at the traditional 50% for your needs, let's say 30% for your wants, and then 20% for your savings or your investing. This is how it will look. The way that I personally would rather see myself run the finances, if you, again, don't have the amount of debt. Again, if you're just starting out, use the 50-30-20 rule. If you're a bit more advanced and you've been able to get out of debt, you don't really have too many cards, if any at all, you don't have any subscriptions, you're definitely living below your means, then I would recommend, and I would prefer to see you at a 50% for your needs, at a possible maybe a 40% for savings, and then maybe a small 10%, and I totally butcher this, and a small 10% right here for your wants. Ignoring the pie graph, we know that this would be a lot bigger. So if it were me in the situation that I'm in right now, I would rather see you 50%, and this is if you wanted to go a bit more aggressive toward investing. 50% toward your needs, 40% toward your savings, and then 10% toward your wants, which again gives us 100% any way you slice it. If maybe you wanted to take a different approach and you wanted to use 40% for your needs, 50% for your savings, which is even, for me, even better, and then 10% for your wants, then you can play around with it that way. One thing that I highly suggest is never go above 30% for your wants. You can maybe come up with this, maybe at 20%, maybe drop the savings to 30. Maybe if you wanted to have a little bit more fun, go on that family vacation that you've always wanted, you can drop that back down to the for the 20%. But I wouldn't suggest going above the 30%. Stay within the guidelines of the 50-30-20. And that's going to help you not only save faster, that's going to help you invest faster, and that's going to make you smarter with your money. And there you have it, the 50-30-20 rule. Sounds simple, but I can assure you that if you are looking at your finances right now, if you're not sitting down, I highly encourage you to take a seat, because it's going to scare you how much money you find in that want column that you shouldn't be spending, especially if you are on the track for financial freedom and wanting to come out of debt. So start out with the 50-30-20 rule. That's going to be the ground level, the framework, and the foundation for ultimately where you're able to build for your investing portfolio, and then work your way up to something like this: a 50% for needs, 40% for savings, and a 10% for your wants. And I can assure you, you're going to get to your goal a lot faster of paying down your debt, buying your first house, investing in stocks, starting your 401k, opening up your Roth IRA, and so on. So give it a shot. Let me know down in the comments if you've already applied this, or if this is going to be your first time applying it. We'll love to hear about it. If you haven't done so already and you found value in this content, it would mean a lot to me if you guys hit that like button down below. It lets YouTube know that this is information worth sharing with others. Don't forget to subscribe and join the official community, and tap that notification bell so you can be notified every time we have content like this coming out each and every single week. Once again, my name is Irvin Pena, also known as Irv Official. Until next time, everyone, we'll see ya.